The courtroom fell silent as the arrogant billionaire strolled in, oozing confidence and entitlement. He glanced at the judge's bench, scoffed, and remained seated, refusing to rise. The reason? The judge was a black woman. Whispers spread like wildfire through the room, disbelief etched on every face. But the judge's calm demeanor didn't waver. She leaned forward, her piercing gaze cutting through his arrogance, and with a voice as steady as steel, she said something so profound it froze everyone in their tracks. What happened next would leave the billionaire and the entire courtroom shattered. Before we jump into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love powerful stories of justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss what's coming next. Now, let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Judge Maya Carter, the clerk announced, but the billionaire barely glanced up from his phone. Maya Carter wasn't just any judge. She was the youngest, most accomplished woman to ever sit on that bench. But that wasn't what caught people's attention. It was the color of her skin and the quiet strength in her eyes, a combination that made both allies and enemies uncomfortable. Maya had grown up in the heart of a struggling neighborhood, where every step forward felt like a battle against stereotypes. Despite the odds, she excelled, graduating at the top of her class at Harvard Law. But in a world where wealth often silenced justice, her rise to power wasn't celebrated by all. The billionaire, Richard Lawson, known for his ruthless business tactics and an ego that could fill the courtroom, smirked as he leaned back in his chair. To him, Maya wasn't a threat. She was just another person he believed he could bulldoze. What Lawson didn't know was that Maya Carter had faced men like him before, and every single one of them had underestimated her, until it was too late. "Your Honor," Lawson drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. "With all due respect, are you sure you're qualified to handle a case of this magnitude?" The courtroom gasped, the insult hanging in the air like a thick cloud. Maya didn't flinch. She met his gaze, her calm composure unnerving him more than any outburst could. This wasn't the first time someone had questioned her abilities, but Lawson's arrogance wasn't just personal. It was systemic. He had used his wealth and influence to crush anyone who stood in his way, hiding behind a team of high-priced lawyers who twisted justice to his favor. His empire had left countless victims in its wake, and now Maya was tasked with holding him accountable for a fraud case that could dismantle everything he'd built. But Lawson wasn't playing fair. That much became clear when his legal team flooded the court with endless motions to delay the trial, attempting to exhaust her patience and resources. Behind the scenes, whispers of threats against Maya's reputation, and even her life, started to surface. The stakes weren't just about one man's guilt or innocence. This was a fight against a system that had long been skewed to protect men like him. But as Lawson leaned back in his chair, flashing a smug grin, he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated just how far Maya was willing to go for justice. What he didn't know was that Maya had uncovered something in his empire that even he wasn't prepared to face, and it was about to change everything. "You seem awfully confident, Mr. Lawson," Maya said, her voice calm but carrying an undertone that made everyone sit a little straighter. Lawson smirked, shrugging casually. "Confidence comes naturally when you're always on top, Your Honor," he replied, the words dripping with arrogance. But Maya wasn't rattled. What no one in the courtroom knew, what even Lawson's team hadn't pieced together, was that Maya Carter had been quietly working behind the scenes. Every late-night motion, every piece of evidence buried in paperwork, she had meticulously studied. This case wasn't just another trial for her, it was personal. Years ago, Maya's father had been one of Lawson's many victims. A small business owner, he'd lost everything after being deceived by Lawson's predatory practices. The stress and humiliation had taken a toll, leading to his untimely death. Maya never forgot the look in her father's eyes when he realized the system wasn't built to protect people like him. Now, Maya wasn't just a judge, she was the silent architect of Lawson's unraveling. She had called in favors, dug into sealed documents, and found the one piece of evidence that could topple his empire, a trail of transactions connecting Lawson to illegal offshore accounts. As she sat on the bench, her calm demeanor masking the storm beneath, Maya realized something. Lawson had no idea the hammer was about to fall, and it was going to come from someone he'd underestimated from the start. But the real question was, would he crumble under the weight of his own lies? Or was there more to this man's schemes than even Maya had uncovered? Your Honor, with all due respect, this evidence is circumstantial at best, Lawson's lead attorney argued, his voice strained but steady. Maya raised an eyebrow, letting the words hang in the air. Circumstantial? She echoed, her tone sharp enough to cut through the room. She leaned forward slightly. Then, perhaps you'd care to explain the wire transfers from Mr. Lawson's personal account to shell companies overseas, because those seem rather specific to me. The attorney froze, and for the first time, Lawson's confident facade cracked. His jaw tightened, his fingers drumming against the table as his lawyers whispered frantically. Maya's team had discovered the transactions buried in a labyrinth of accounts. The closer they looked, the more damning the evidence became, each document linking back to Lawson's shady dealings. But the real revelation came late one night when Maya's clerk burst into her office holding a file. You need to see this, he said breathlessly. Inside were details of a whistleblower, a former accountant from Lawson's company who had fled the country after uncovering the fraud. The accountant had been silenced with threats and money, but now they were ready to talk. Maya worked quietly but relentlessly, arranging a video testimony under strict confidentiality. The testimony exposed a web of corruption so vast, it painted Lawson not just as a fraudulent businessman, but as the mastermind of an international money laundering operation. The courtroom grew tenser with each passing day of the trial. Maya strategically released pieces of evidence, unraveling Lawson's schemes layer by layer. Every smug grin he attempted was met with another blow to his defense, and yet there was still one critical question unanswered. Maya knew there was one final piece, something so devastating it would leave no room for doubt, but uncovering it meant risking everything she had worked for. The clock was ticking, and Lawson was starting to realize that the walls around him were closing in. But even as Maya prepared her next move, she couldn't shake the feeling that Lawson had one last trick up his sleeve, something she hadn't seen coming. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Maya's gaze swept across the room. Before we proceed, I have one final piece of evidence to present, she announced, her voice steady but charged with purpose. Lawson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence finally giving way to unease. Maya nodded to the bailiff, who handed her a sealed envelope. She opened it deliberately, letting the suspense build. This, she began, holding up a document, is a notarized statement from a whistleblower, an accountant who worked directly under Mr. Lawson. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. In this statement, they detail how Mr. Lawson orchestrated fraudulent deals, laundered millions through offshore accounts, and used intimidation to silence anyone who dared to challenge him. Lawson's face drained of color. His lead attorney sprang to his feet. "Objection! This is hearsay!" he shouted, but Maya remained unfazed. "The court has already verified the authenticity of this statement, Counselor," she said, her tone firm. "And there's more." She gestured toward the screen in the courtroom. A video began to play, a live deposition from the whistleblower themselves. The former accountant appeared on the screen, their voice trembling but resolute as they recounted the years of corruption and deceit they had witnessed under Lawson's command. But the real bombshell came when they revealed a set of encrypted files they had saved as insurance, files containing emails, bank statements, and signed agreements directly implicating Lawson. The screen flickered as each document was displayed for the court to see. Gasps echoed through the room as Lawson's signature appeared on deal after deal, tying him to every illegal activity Maya had uncovered. Lawson's composure shattered. "This is outrageous. These are lies," he shouted, rising from his seat. But Maya wasn't finished. She calmly held up another document. "And this," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos, "is the court order freezing all of Mr. Lawson's assets, effective immediately. You've spent years using your wealth to evade justice, Mr. Lawson. That ends today." The courtroom erupted into stunned murmurs. Lawson's attorneys scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The evidence was irrefutable, and everyone knew it. As Lawson slumped back into his chair, his defeat finally sinking in, Maya locked eyes with him. "For years, you believed you were untouchable," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "But justice doesn't bow to arrogance or power. It finds the truth, and today it found you." The room fell silent, all eyes on Lawson, as the weight of his downfall settled over him. But even in the face of overwhelming evidence, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't entirely over. Yet. The courtroom remained silent as the verdict was read. "Guilty on all counts." The words echoed like a hammer striking steel, sealing Richard Lawson's fate. For the first time, his confident facade was completely shattered. The billionaire who had spent his life manipulating the system now sat powerless, surrounded by guards ready to escort him away. As the crowd began to disperse, Maya Carter remained seated, watching Lawson with a steady gaze. She felt no triumph, no gloating satisfaction, only the quiet resolve of knowing justice had been served. This wasn't about her or even her father's memory. It was about the countless others who had suffered in silence under the weight of Lawson's greed. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, activists, reporters, and everyday people who had followed the trial with bated breath. When Maya finally emerged, the applause was deafening. But amidst the cheers, her words remained calm and measured as she addressed the press. "This case was never about bringing down a single man," she began. "It was about showing that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law. Justice requires courage, not just from those who enforce it, but from those who stand up and demand it." Her words resonated deeply, but it was the look in the eyes of Lawson's victims that stayed with her. For the first time in years, they had hope, not just for themselves, but for a system that could change. As Maya walked away from the courthouse, she thought about her father. She could almost hear his voice, proud and full of love. He had always taught her that integrity and resilience were stronger than wealth or privilege. Today, she had proved him right. And while Lawson's story was over, Maya knew hers wasn't. There were more battles to fight, more voices to amplify, and more justice to deliver. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Because in the end, the lesson was clear. True power doesn't come from money or status. It comes from standing firm in the face of injustice, knowing that even when the odds seem impossible, the truth has a way of shining through. Thank you for watching. Maya's story reminds us that standing up for what's right can create lasting change. Whether it's overcoming adversity or challenging injustice, your voice matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts on the story. Let's keep this conversation going. And remember, sharing these stories helps spread the message of justice and fairness, one act of courage at a time. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.